Hi everyone, this is Ramanuj from LawSikho, and today we have our guest Avik Biswas. Hi Avik, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, but somehow my video is not coming. Maybe just give it a few seconds. I think it's just taking some time to sink in.
Okay.
You can hear me, right?
Yeah, you are clearly audible.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get started, I guess. Or should we wait for you to fix the video? Do you what's happening? Like, do you think you can fix the video now, or should you wait? How should we go about it?
Hey, just give me 1 minute.
Okay, sure.
Strangely, it worked absolutely fine during the testing. I don't know what's happening now. Uh,
Maybe you
can
want to
you?
leave it and join back again. Maybe while you joined, you did not switch on your video. Okay, let me
Yeah, yeah,
try
yeah.
requesting
Let
you.
me just do that. Let me just do that. All right.
Okay, so while we are waiting for Abhik, let's just quickly talk a little bit about today's agenda. We are going to talk about the developments that we are seeing in employment law, especially after COVID and even otherwise, and what we can expect in the years to come. So, all of you, I would request you to quickly introduce yourselves in the chat and do tell us if you have any questions that you want us to address during the session. Would love to know that. And let's wait for a week. Please share about you. It will help us to identify what kind of questions I should be asking, what value I could generate for you during the session, which is very useful. All right, we are also live on YouTube. Yeah, so please write your name, your where you are logging in from, and what do you do, and your question. That'll be very nice. Okay, we are waiting for Avik. He still hasn't joined, so I think while Avik is not here, I am going to start talking about the major issues that we are facing in light of COVID crisis. So let's just start talking about that. One major area of concern that has arisen is, of course, there is a huge wage problem, right? So people are facing this challenge where there is the uncertainty about how long people can be paid, employees can be paid while production is shut, and there is a lack of, there's a serious lack of revenue in many companies. Many businesses have been shut out of their revenue streams during the lockdown. So yeah, so I think many people have already paid their salaries in March and April, but it is going to be tough from May onwards. There has been a lot of news in the industry of people being laid off or employees being asked to, take a pay cut or take mandatory holidays. Although these are, sort of, uh, you know, uh, you know, done as a mutual agreement between the employer and the employee, but there are significant questions about how these will be treated if an employee chooses to go to court later on. Uh, there are, of course, concerns about viability of businesses, and for a lot of employees, also a bigger concern right now is that how do we protect our job, because there are entire industries which are completely hit in a very bad way. And let's take airlines industry for example. It is in such it is in such deep trouble that nobody knows how there would be, okay, Avik is here. So I was just saying that how it will be standing at all when this is over, and whenever air travel resumes, how will the finances work out, because many airlines companies were already under stress, and definitely they wouldn't be able to keep their entire crew on their payroll while the lockdown continues and air travel is not coming back anytime soon. So what happens in such circumstances? What are the rights of the employees? And also the fact that we would probably need airlines companies in this world. How they're going to survive? That is another question to balance. And how are things going to happen? So let's welcome Avik. Avik, I think you are online. Can
Yeah,
you hear me?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Now we can hear you and see you. So this is great. Perfect. Okay. So I was just talking while we were waiting for you. I was just talking about, how there are certain things that are already coming up in the industry, especially related to employment law, and some of the issues we are seeing. So one big concern. So have you felt that during the COVID crisis, the entire world of employment law is changing, or it's going totally topsy-turvy from traditional the norms or the way things used to be? Do you think we see a lot of change at this time?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think every practice area is going to see some change or the other because the entire economy will, the way we do business, I think is going to significantly change in the near future, if not long term. But amongst all the practice areas, at least my opinion is the one that is probably affected the most is employment law. Because if you look at our regulations, actually not even our regulations, you look at the global regulations, they are based on a specific construct, which is that you are in touch with your employee, constant touch. You can see what the employee is doing. You can review, monitor, you can track progress, and it's a two-way relationship, right? So I'm not saying that only employer can do that, but the employee can also be in touch with the management. I think our traditional models of doing business in most sectors has to change. I mean, there's no question about it, because this pandemic, what has brought about is it has forced companies across all sectors to rethink the way they do business, and especially the way they engage with their own employees. Because you can't do business, I mean, whether a profitable one, a good one, or a bad one, in any scenario, you cannot do business unless you have control or you're in touch with your employees, any management. So this entire pandemic has brought that change, and you will see a lot of change in even employee engagement. For instance, I think one of the big, at least we're already seeing that, is a lot. a lot of companies are seriously considering reduction in real estate cost, because what this pandemic has taught them is that there are jobs which they thought earlier could not have been done from home or outside office. They have realized that this pandemic has taught them that this actually can be done without sitting in a physical space given by the employer. And to quote a cliche here, necessity is the mother of invention. So they most employers did not really have a choice. So they're seriously considering reduction of real estate cost. When they are reducing real estate cost, that means there's less office space. That means there's less day-to-day interaction with employees. They're thinking models of like, maybe employees can come in. And I'm not talking about during the lockdown. I'm talking about this is post-lockdown, post
Yeah, this
everything.
is TCS, for example, announced that they're going to work with a lot of work from home. Like 80% employees would be in the future working from home. That was pretty interesting.
Exactly. So I mean, TCS, and I think in the next couple of weeks or maybe even earlier, you will see a lot of other big companies and
Right, and TCS is, by the way, the biggest employer in India. It's bigger than Indian Railways, so that is significant. That would have an impact. Like people are going to get used to this, and even employees might be wanting to work from home. Not only employers. I mean, it gives them a lot of flexibility in that terms. But there are so many jobs which cannot be done from home, right? There are physical jobs, there are infrastructure jobs, there are things that, and also to be honest, like if I am allowed to say, in our we are a company which has been always working from home. Like 50% was always work from home. But a lot of us are now dying to go back to office, because while we are working from home, it feels too monotonous in some ways, and we want to have that environment of an office and a work and home separation. So what do you think about that? Do you think that would be a significant factor in the way employee engagement and employment itself develops?
so there are two things to it. One is, of course, the legal structure, the statutory requirements that is there. I'll come to that a little later. I think the equally important, if not more, is I think today the role that HR teams in every company is going to play, the kind of role. I mean, look, HR anyway plays a significant role in the success of every organization. I think their role will be probably enhanced, and their people will realize how crucial they are. Because I mean, if I were today, an HR job or an HR leader job is not an enviable job at all. Because what the expectation would be, what I suspect is that you have the same sort of close knit. I mean, look, all organizations thrive if employees are close knit in their teams, larger teams. I mean, that's proven beyond doubt. I think what the challenge will be for HR teams today is to maintain the same bonhomie, to maintain the same touch, so to say, to maintain that camaraderie, even in a virtual space. Now I already know of some of our clients, their HR teams, and these are top, fantastic HR teams. They are exploring things like, maybe we should have, this is again after everything settles down, maybe we should have people coming in by groups, so that in a month you actually end up meeting everybody else in your team or anybody else who's relevant to your work profile, so that you still maintain that kind of touch. So that way HR plays a very, very crucial role now.
Right, right. But there
Coming
also, you had many companies which were even earlier like 100% work from home. There are $100 million plus revenue companies around the world. There are many examples which are fully work from home. Basecamp being one. Ufu Forms, which was the first company that I know that crossed $100 million revenue. In India, I think we had not too many examples like that. And I think in India, but even in India, we have pretty much people working from home in certain sectors, like there are plenty of designers, plenty of people who work in the creative industry. Sometimes they do work from home, like as sort of as freelancers, so they probably have more experience in it. I have met a lot of developers who work from home. I was in Goa for a while, for 2 years, and I met a lot of people who are digital nomads, so called. They would travel and work from anywhere in the world. But these were like, there were examples, but this was the very unusual situation. And now this going mainstream, would
Yeah.
it really go mainstream is a question. Do you think it's really going to go mainstream?
See, it's funny and ironic, and I'll tell you why. See, the examples that you give, and let's say a small organization or even a large organization, when they have a work from home facility, remember our premise today has changed completely, because what was not normal earlier is now normal, right? So earlier, work from home was an option. Employees used to welcome it because it's sometimes it's very convenient. Some employees, and I know for a fact that even in our firm, that
Places like Bangalore, especially, like traveling is so hard, so people prefer to work from. They have like 2 days work from home in a week in many big companies, that so that they don't have to travel so much and save time.
exactly, right. I mean, look, traffic is a. I mean, I don't recall one Indian city, large Indian city, where traffic today isn't an issue, right? Like if you have to go from Gurgaon to central Delhi, sometimes it may take you a couple of hours if you're not using the metro. What I'm saying is all of that work from home was an option earlier. It was a good to have option because people it's a discretionary thing that that employers would grant you, and you would therefore feel happy. It's like a win-win situation, right? It's not happening all the time, but when it happens, it's a great thing because people prefer it for a variety of reasons. Some have family, some feel that they are far more optimal when they work from home. Some feel, why should I waste my time in traffic? And that's those are absolutely justifiable, fantastic reasons. Today, it's the other way around, where work from home is no more an option; it's compulsory for you. So therefore, what
But
was
I think the
earlier,
larger question is it going to stay? Is it going to stay this way? Will this be a trend that continues after the pandemic is over, or the social distancing norms are eased off? Do you think this will continue?
yes, I think it'll stay. I think it'll stay. In fact, because see, there are a lot of things that this pandemic has taught us, and of course, one is the medical thing and all of that. But in terms of working, our ways of working, it has taught all of us, irrespective of which sector, the number of employees in the organization, it has taught us that work, efficient work, can be done from home, and B, more increasingly, employers today are realizing that it also makes economic benefit to actually have a sizable part of your operations working from home, because you're just reducing so much of cost.
So basically,
And
what you are saying is that work from office will be a luxury given to a few people now. Okay.
one is luxury, maybe. The other is if it's necessity. I still think that management representatives, senior management, middle management, perhaps will still have a lot more touch with the physical space of office, because there are some things. And this is my personal opinion. There are some things probably which, in terms of critical decision making, probably can be done faster. I'm not saying better, but can be done faster if you meet physically. So there are things that will continue to remain in office. There are jobs which you rightly pointed out earlier, which cannot be done from home. So those things will remain. But wherever I think employers find the opportunity where a job can be done from home, I don't think from now on they will shy away from it.
Okay, that's a very interesting thing, because I'm sure this brings a lot of legal issues on its wake. Work from home and legal issues. So I'm sure this is something that you are getting lots of queries on these days and keeping you fairly busy, giving
Yeah,
opinions and structuring and looking at people's employee plans, engagement plans, I believe.
yeah.
So one issue that has come is surveillance during during work. So a lot of companies entire employment policy or productivity policy revolves around being able to surveil people within their office premises. So for example, I want to know what exactly you're doing. Like, some jobs are obviously different, but there are plenty of jobs in the mass market where it's like I expect you to sit at your desk and type away or like make calls, right? And those are obviously you can't do that when people are at home unless you install softwares on their phones, on their computers, and you put them under surveillance. There were these softwares even before, right? So there are a number of remote employee tracking softwares that used to exist, but right now I believe they're doing really well, seeing real big upsurge in the sales. And a lot of people have complained about how they are feeling invaded into their privacy, and how it's like some kind of modern day slavery, that somebody's taking a screenshot every 5 minutes of your screen of your computer, putting a software on your phone, app on your phone to track whether you are making phone calls that are actually office calls or other calls. So they're listening in, and people are really scared, and there is a general discomfort around this. So what do you think about this? Obviously, from a legal standpoint, probably if you're giving your consent to do this, you can do it, but how far? And we don't really have a very well developed employee privacy law, I believe, or I may be wrong, I'm not an expert on this, but do throw some light on this.
So the solution is actually it's a confluence of your internal culture and law. I'll begin with my pet peeve, and Ramanuj, I'm sure that I don't know if you agree or not, but I'm pretty sure this is not the first time you are hearing this. I am personally of the opinion that just because somebody spends 14 hours in office does not make him or her hardworking. All right.
Sure.
I, I, I think the number of hours that you spend on your desk or in the physical premises of your employer, again, this is my personal opinion, is in no way an indication of how good an employee or a worker you are or how optimal you are in your work.
Sure.
Right? It's funny now that a lot of organizations, and especially the management and HR leadership, is realizing that. I think where we are seeing a lot of progress is that organizations are now developing smarter ways, smarter matrices to evaluate performance, to evaluate productivity, to evaluate the work that you've done. You cannot be, I think, especially from a work from home scenario, you cannot afford to be vague anymore. Like if you give somebody a deliverable, and if you leave the deliverable open-ended and say, I need it, in the next 5 days, the point is you've left it open-ended. If you do not break things up, if you don't break things up in milestones, or
so
if
you mean that
not,
people are becoming better at delegation, essentially?
They are actually becoming better in breaking down a deliverable, breaking down into milestones, breaking down into...
And then tracking it as well.
Exactly, because that's the only way to track it.
Right. So one of the first things we did when you went fully work from home, while we have been trying to do it from a long time back, once you went fully online, I work from home mode, one of the things we had to do, given that we have around 67 people working right now, back then we had around 54, 55 when the lockdown started. We had to install an online task management board where we could actually delegate and track whether and set deadlines and all of that. And it could be all in one place. And we had to train our entire team to use it. But see, this is one level of tracking delegations, which is non-invasive. But as a lawyer, I'm more concerned and very curious about your take on surveillance technology. I can give some examples. I'm sure I'm sure you get some queries around this. But what happens when the employer wants to track your productivity by putting software on your phone and on your computer, which may have been provided by the office to start with, to track how you're spending your day? and how whether you are doing it like taking screenshots. This is a real thing. Like number of IT companies, large IT companies. I won't take names for obvious reasons, but they are using screenshot and like actually capturing a data. The camera is on while you're working. Basically, it's some sort of proctoring is going on and surveillance is going on while employees are working. So what about that?
So there are a lot of factors here, and of course, it's a nuanced argument. But see, the first factor is, and I'm not taking the easy way out, so don't misunderstand. First factor is that all the employers who do this, and again, there are various kinds of
No,
employers in the
firstly, is
sense
it legal? What does the law say about it? I mean, I'm not
it
going
is.
into. It is
It
legal.
is, it is, it is. As long as you explain what exactly the software does, what kind of data it tracks, you explain the kind of information that the employer server is taking from you, and then you have consent, it's legal. All right.
Right. And as
So
long as it's basically a contractual obligation and an agreement, right?
yeah, yeah,
That you are
yeah.
and only way this could be stopped is if government makes a rule that what is the extent to which you can do this. Right now, there's no limitation, right?
Look, there are, like, for instance, if you want to track and I'm giving an extreme example here, if you want to track the employees, let's say hours in a day that he or she has put in on a certain deliverable, you have no business in knowing what the employee's medical data is, right?
Sure.
There has to be a justifiable connection, a legitimate connection between the information that you are getting from the employee and the information you're making use of. I mean, why is it? I mean, what's the nexus for? All right.
Mhm.
The law gives the employee a right to object. The law gives the employee the right to ask questions. The law gives the regulator to ask the questions. Now, most responsible employers, and I say this without much hesitation, I can tell you most responsible employers don't even venture into that kind of territory, right? Because the fallout of something going wrong is significantly more than even taking the risk. Also, most employers aren't really interested. I mean, I can tell you because I can tell you from our experience, because 99% of our clients are employers, they're not really interested in somebody's personal and sensitive information. They are really interested in what kind of information ties into the work he or she is doing. Now, having said that, sometimes because it's technology, sometimes the technology also has sort of grabs data from certain other things. So a lot of employees are putting in walls for that as well, because there are multiple levels of protection and confidentiality where they themselves reject the information. The technology rejects the information. So on the whole, I think most employers are not interested to go beyond what it's needed to have the nexus between what the employee is doing and what the employer's business is.
Yeah, but currently it is only self-regulation, and there are, do you feel that there should be some law around it, or do you think law is going to come up in this area? Data protection law, of course, is coming up, so that would be one level of protection. But do you think anything else we might see some development in this area? Some case laws, some statutes, anything, rules or regulations?
Honestly, I am actually expecting. I mean, of course, the bill is pending, but I think in the next year, probably you will see a lot more prosecution and also a lot more case law on this, because unlike North America and certainly Europe, we don't have much jurisprudence when it comes to employee data
And
in
employee
the
privacy.
yeah in the wider construct of data privacy. We don't have much jurisprudence, unfortunately,
Right.
because unlike again North America and Europe, a lot of these concepts are fairly new to us. All right. When I say new, I don't mean they've been here for the last 6 months and all, but if you vis-a-vis how long it has been there in those parts of the world, we are taking actually baby steps.
Right. So that brings me to my second question, really, like, which is very, very connected. And the thing is, that is client data. Now, employees have access to client data in a big way, and they're taking it home instead of it used to be that, okay, in the office, there is certain measures of control that you can exercise. I can give you an example. So, for example, ISO standards, right? There's ISO standard for data security, and a number of people had that, right? Number of people had obtained that after spending significant amount of money, effort, developing processes. Now all of it has gone for a toss because now everybody is suddenly working from home. Earlier, even if the CEO wants to walk in, he has to carry a card and that access card and all of that, and there's the information control. Now none of that is there. Suddenly everybody is working from home. So you literally took the machines and sent it to their home in some cases. That okay, now at least you work. So, what impact is all this having, like on data security, and how are companies ensuring data security in this environment?
So I'm very glad you brought this up because I think this is the single biggest impediment to an efficient working from home policy being rolled out across all sectors. Because employers, rightfully so, are petrified of data breaches, especially to do with client data, right? Now, there are a few measures which are being taken. From the legal standpoint, I think policies are being made far more tight. They're being tightened, like the things that you can do with the data, the things you cannot do or should not do. So employee policies, internal policies are being made far more stringent. They're tightened. They're being tightened up. Second thing is, I think this again, you will see this slowly happening once the lockdown gets lifted. You will see a lot more technology coming into place with reference to the hardware. There will be a lot more tech which will be installed on employee system. Either given again, but there are very nuanced arguments. Either it can be a system of the employee or it can be a system given by the employer. So there are two things to it, because a lot of employers have bring your own device policies also. But in a nutshell, in terms of hardware, I think a lot more tech will be given where there'll be significant amount of restrictions which will be put on the hardware, where you may not be able to do certain things with the data which you could have done actually if you were in office. So that's the technology bit of it. The third bit is I suspect that to send out a message, I think at least in the first 6-8 months, there'll be a lot more prosecution by a lot more action taken by employers against erring employees. And some of the actions may be very stringent from an outsider's perspective. It can be as tough as criminal action, because basically what you're doing is your breaches under the IT Act, and you're also dealing with it's a criminal, sometimes a criminal conspiracy also. So employers will send out a message as well, I have a feeling, and if you ask me personally, quite rightly so, because there is nothing as valuable as client data with a certain employer, because breach of that data has multiple implications, and not
but
just
but don't you think that it will be very hard to even detect data breaches, etc., because you are just losing control over your data? Like, in a way, data was centralized in an office space. From there, suddenly the data is available everywhere, and whatever system you may create, it's very easy to hack into. It's not that challenging to hack into systems and get access to data. And not even if the employee is not willingly do it, it is probably the risk of data breach would be at a next level, because the employee may inadvertently install some software or download some malware or virus or things. It's like the risk is altogether at a different level right now, and I doubt even most companies who had complied to GDPR or things like that, they would still be compliant at this point.
no. So okay, so no, it's a fair question, but I think you will see a lot of change in the tech space with reference to the hardware. A lot of companies have already started. I mean, they're in the final stage of developing software which can actually track even where from one folder where you've moved the other folder to in terms of timestamps. Newer companies will either invest in that kind of tech internally or they will go in the market and buy that tech. It's not like the tech is not available today.
That
It is.
technology is already there. Yes, of course.
Yeah. I mean, some of them it's quite premium rates, so at least their business will go up. But you will see a lot of investment in those things. Of course, you cannot account for exceptions. There will always be exceptions where employees may hack into things and may get sort of a backdoor into things that they can do which the company does not allow. There can be inadvertent things also where then again your mens rea comes into play and all of that, but those are exceptions. I think the overall message that probably I would like to communicate is that there will be a lot more restrictions working from home from a data perspective, from a business commercial data client data perspective.
You are saying that there would be a lot of software would be implemented and that would take care of the problem because you don't really have any other option.
Exactly, and in fact, I mean, I know a number of our clients already have this philosophy that if you are given your hardware from the company, you cannot install any other software, and if unless licensed and provided by the company itself. And in fact, if you do that, the accountability, it's like a blanket accountability of something going wrong after that is entirely yours. I don't know too many employees who will take a risk like that.
And this is also keep track of like this technology putting the employees' work and that device to a lot of scrutiny. So that's a very interesting scenario. So let's move on from this a little. Be much more nuanced issues. But one thing that comes to mind, in this scenario is definitely there are large industries which are completely shut out. Restaurants, movie theaters, airlines, sports industry, film industry, shootings have completely stopped. So there's like a huge number of jobs in the services business that have completely disappeared and there is no visibility on when they're going to come back. And for certain things, we are quite sure that they're not going to come back anytime soon. For example, international travel, right? International travel, airlines. Now we know that airlines is a hugely, it's a big employer, and it's also something that's like it's like a huge navigate with it very easily. You cannot shut it down and shut it back up whenever you want because you have these highly trained people and people who have like this workforce is very, very skilled but very specialized. They can't really do anything else. And airlines company has a lot of other, for example, liabilities in terms of aircraft leasing out and everything. I'm not sure what would be the what kind of reprieve they'll get it in light of COVID. But in any case, they are not going to be able to keep their entire workforce for lakhs of people without being able to generate any revenue. They won't be probably able to keep them on board for months and months or half a year or a full year, right? And it could very well take a year to come. So what's happening in those scenarios are we seeing a lot of retrenchments, layoffs, or even if they retrench, they'll have to start back up at some point. It's not like it will stay. It's not a company going bankrupt or airline being shut down. They would have to restart back up at some point. So I don't want to focus only on the airline industry, but generally speaking, this paradigm would be happening in many other businesses as well. So for example, movies or movie theaters, right? Or restaurants. So what's happening?
So, I mean, I think the basic premise would be, Ramanuj, that all sectors are affected. And that goes without saying. I think there are very few sectors right now which is actually seeing an uptick. Of course, there are some exceptions, but exceptions always prove the rule.
Yes.
I think amongst the affected sectors, I think it's a bloodbath, I think, in certain sectors. One is, of course, airline. The other is travel. The other is hospitality. The other is entertainment. These sectors are really badly affected. Now, again, even in these sectors, I think you have different kinds of employers. Now, I obviously can't get into names because of obvious client confidentiality and let's not create
Sure,
controversy
sure.
also.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So, but look, there are also employers of various sorts. Ones who have enough cash in the bank, ones who are fast running out of cash, and the third will be ones who've already run out of cash. Okay. The ones who have cash in the bank, I think they are exploring various ways. All right. They are offering voluntary pay cuts for some of their employees. I'm stressing on the fact voluntary, actually. I am stressing on the fact voluntary. They are not compelling people. They are also asking a lot of the employees if they would like to go on paid leave so that when they come back, they do not have to work. They don't take time off so that their productivity goes up. Third is a lot of them are restructuring their compensation packages in where your fixed component is significantly lower and your variable component goes up because it always depends on the collective target and the team target of the individual and the company. Fourth are a lot of them are actually asking their employees if they could defer a part of their pay to a time when business will have at least, if not total normal scenario, but at least some semblance of normalcy. Now, these are multiple ways in which employers who are who have cash in the bank and who are also running out of cash, these are multiple ways in which they are trying to uh, what you call it, salvage the situation.
Salvage the situation.
Yeah, for employees who've already run out of cash, I honestly I don't have an answer because they are already in the doldrums. They don't have cash in the bank to pay.
And that
And
is very
again,
normal because very few businesses have cash in the bank to pay for all their expenses for 3 months without seeing any revenue. That's like
yeah, yeah.
unimaginable in most cases. Yeah. But
And it's not
service
like
industry is worse affected because there are manufacturing. You know that it has to start back up. You know that it has to. It won't be like 0%. Maybe 40%, 30%, 60%, but not going to be zero. And there is also many manufacturing has been there a push to start manufacturing back up. But service is in a very different scenario. So are people laying off, or what's the law right now for layoff and retrenchment? And obviously not everybody is a worker, right? There are white collar workers, so who can be fired with one month of notice period. So in most cases, right?
so okay. So I'll get into a little bit of technicality here. So there's a lot of misconception, especially when I talk to clients and generally a lot of people, is who's a workman and who's not, right?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
The predominant impression, I don't know, I mean, if you've seen this also, Ramanoj, but uh, I feel that predominantly the impression is that anybody who's not a shop level, the floor level worker has to be basically only blue collar workers are workmen. That's a predominant impression. That's actually not true,
Right.
right?
It's based on a
Right.
salary range, right?
No, the salary range also, that jurisprudence has also developed. Because if
Right.
you look at the 10,000 rupee salary range, our minimum wages in certain states are more than that.
No, right now I think in some act it has been revised to 24,000 from what I remember last checked.
See, the jurisprudence today has developed to the extent that saying it majorly depends, significantly depends on your job role and responsibilities, on whether you have decision making power on behalf of the company, whether you have managerial responsibilities. You'll have to go as per the job profile of each person to determine whether he or she is a workman or not.
So are you saying that even in the IT industry, somebody who's just developing code but has no decision making power you will be considered a workman possibly.
I'm not saying that. Jurisprudence and Labor Department and a lot of other regulators are also saying that.
I got it. Like, I just, of course, it's your opinion as a lawyer that I'm asking.
No, see, look, okay. If you're an individual contributor, if you don't have a decision-making authority on behalf of the company, if you're not managing anybody else, you are a workman.
Okay.
You cannot get out of the law. The law does not distinguish between what kind of fancy designation you have, which sector you belong to, whether you work in a top Fortune 500 company or the shop across the road.
Got it. But in any case, the industrial, unless you are in a factory or a manufacturing sector, it won't. The Industrial Dispute Act won't apply, right? You will be governed by, in a lot of cases, by the Shops and Establishment Act, which lays down your conditions of employment, minimum conditions, right? For example, notice period, which
that
is very different.
That is true, but even in an IT establishment, your rules of dispute and who's a workman and what kind of the overall relationship between an employer and employee is governed by the IDA, irrespective of whether it's a factory or an IT establishment or any other sector. Again, the law does not make a distinction.
Sure.
So, in fact, there's enough jurisprudence, case law where labor departments and courts across the country have told IT employers, basically, see, the first, generally when an employee goes to a labor department to complain or goes to a court to complain a claim, the first defense usually by the employer is that the law does not apply to him. All right. And usually what happens is the court turns down that argument. The court basically asks, and I have been at the receiving end also, give me one provision where it says it does not apply to this sector. And honestly, at that point of time, there's nothing to substantially back up your argument.
Right.
So that part is there. So in going back to retrenchments and all, so I think employers are, yes, there will be probably retrenchment. There'll be probably retrenchment going forward.
Also, the retrenchments will be governed by ID Act, essentially. Promoting.
Exactly. So basically your basic rules, and I'm not going to the state regulations and all because 29 states, there will be different ID rules for that. But basically if you're 100 and above, in most states, workmen, you'll have to pay retrenchment compensation of 15 days wages for every year of service, plus your notice pay, plus your gratuity if you're 5 years, plus your any other contractual entitlement that you may be eligible for. So retrenchment also is
not an easy option.
It's not easy for an employer because the law of the land is fairly clear on what you have to do when you have to go through a mass reduction in force. In good times, and when I say good times, I mean normal times. But
you have to also take government approval.
It depends on the state.
Do you also?
Okay. It depends on the state. It depends on the threshold also.
Right.
Yeah. So again, so
that has to be checked whether according to state rules, and if you are more than 100 people, if 100 people, your organization of 100 people, not that 100 people are being retrenched, but even if you have more than 100 people, you have to actually see whether you have to take government approval for retrenchment, which may be a very challenging thing in this scenario, right? It won't be
absolutely. See, one of the most complicated things about employment law, labor and employment laws in this country is that you have a central set of legislation. You also have state-wise legislations. And you know how labor and employment sometimes is such a politically sensitive affair. So a lot of states, their strategy, their political outlook, you can see through their state-level employment legislations. All right. So when you are doing any exercise as an employer, and especially if an employer has offices in 5-6 different locations across the country, you will always have to evaluate your central legislations as well as your state. And sometimes it's not an easy task. It's often very difficult. I mean, that way we are very close to US as a country in terms of how our labor and employment laws are structured, because they have federal laws and they'll have very strong state laws also governing employment. We are pretty similar in that context. In fact, I mean, if you ask me personally, they have also very socialist laws. We don't realize it, but US has actually very socialist employment legislation. So
Right.
does Europe, parts of Europe actually.
Yeah, yeah. So, what do you expect that, this is a bloodbath scenario, of course, but, what are what are your advice to employers who need to retrench or lay off? Even sometimes you need to lay off a chunk of your team so that you can survive with the rest and at least keep afloat for a longer runway, right? So, what are employers like? What would you be your advice to such people in such scenarios, and what are they doing in fact?
I think most employers who come to us with these kind of mandates, I think you've hit the nail on the head. They are looking at short-term pain in lieu of long-term gain. It sometimes, I mean, it's very unfortunate, but sometimes it's just necessary that, you'll have a certain percentage of the workforce being let go of, or there'll be, restructuring of compensation packages or whatever remedial measure they can think of. But that's vis-a-vis the overall larger collective benefit of the organization. And that's something, look, when they come to us, they've already thought about this long and hard. Our job is to just help them navigate through what the due process is as per the central and state laws, and the best way to ensure that the process is done in an extremely fair and objective manner. All regulations are complied with, and also in a way it's done in a very humanitarian way, because it's after all human beings, right? I mean, of course, everybody is dispensable, and doesn't matter from the CEO to the lowest level of
No,
employee.
of course, if the
Anybody.
company doesn't have money, you just keep running it anyway. Nobody's going to get anything. Like, what's the point? And everybody will lose their jobs in the end of the day in that scenario. So it's justifiable
Exactly.
that way. Uh, it's just wanted to ask you about government policy. What do you think is the government policy right now around this? So obviously, government has a big concern that a lot of MSMEs shutting down, a lot of big companies shutting down will lead to massive unemployment, massive output decrease in the economy. So I think one of the priorities of the government is to keep the companies afloat, and they have done so in various ways, including restricting, IVC actions, insolvency actions under IVC in insolvency and bankruptcy code. But the other thing, interestingly, they have suspended labor laws in several states, right? They have suspended most of the labor laws that apply in several states. So, do you think this is a direction of government policy right now, that more employer-friendly approach going forward?
I think before thinking long-term benefit for either employer or employee, I think what you can expect is a lot more regulations for the immediate future. Because when things restart, see, so far what has happened is, now let's do a comparison between what has been happening across the globe and what's been happening in India. If you look at a Canada or a UK or an Australia, where what the governments there have been doing is they are saying that I'm going to fund 50% of your employees' pay within a certain range for a certain number of employees. They also have conditions attached to it, but they say they're going to fund overall. They're going to fund. I don't think, honestly, it's reasonable for us to expect that kind of help, because in terms of the financial position as a nation, we are nowhere close to those economies. So it may not be reasonable to expect that. Having said that, today I don't think we've had too many other also benefits which have been given, at least, and if you leave the suspension of labor laws for a moment out, if you leave that out for a moment, I don't think there has been that many benefits offered by the government to the employers. In fact, the government has said that you can't cut salaries during the entire period of the lockdown. There actually, apart from a couple of states, there actually has been no specific order which says you can't dismiss employees. although there are some labor commissioners across the country who are interpreting the March 29th Ministry of Home Affairs order to also say that you can't dismiss employees. But that's a different debate altogether. But so far, I think the rules and regulations are very clear with only with reference to cutting of salaries. You cannot cut salaries till the lockdown is there. Okay. A lot of employers are under severe financial stress because of that specific regulation. And there has been no that way significant financial package or benefit that has helped them as yet. What I feel is in the next 1 month, you will probably see more of those where financial benefits will be probably offered to employers, if not mass, but at least they'll begin with certain sectors. Because again, this is not as a lawyer or not as an, I mean, and certainly not an economist, but just common sense. You will have to have some sort of benefits given to employers for them to restart or ride through this storm. And I suspect you will see those things coming in the next 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay. So what happens to all this threat that, there are some states which have issued threats that if you don't pay salaries, then the owners will be put in jail, etc. And there have been like TV news debates about this, and we have had people being scared also about it. But basically, most employers have said, look, whatever we could do, we have done, and we can't do anymore. And for example, in Noida, the owners have declared that we don't have money to pay anymore. We have had money till April. We have paid the salary of April. May will not be able to pay. In fact, they have paid in March, and many said that in April they haven't been able to pay. There are many people who couldn't pay the April salary to their workers, and they said that if there is no, you are not allowed to start back up. There's no way we are going to pay, and you put us in jail. We can't do anything about it because we simply don't have the money. And on the other hand, many people are saying, no, you have made profits for so many years, now you pay, etc. But, that is looking increasingly like a very futile argument and debate as to whether people who have made profits in the past are going to pay their employees now. And many people do not have money. Like it's acknowledged that many MSMEs were reeling under a lot of economic stress over the last few years. So what's going to happen in this scenario? Do you think government will actually prosecute, or is it only mostly a political overture that you have to be paying, but they're not really going to enforce it? Because if they start enforcing it, of course, it will be another kind of chaos altogether.
No, absolutely. Look, technically, do they have a right to prosecute? Is there criminal prosecution? The answer is yes. Because the 29th March Ministry of Home Affairs order, they've invoked provisions of the Disaster Management Act. The DMA has criminal prosecution. So that way, the legal basis, at least the legal connection, the nexus is fairly clear, and there's no lack of clarity there. There are a lot of challenges that is basically happening in various high courts and even the Supreme Court on the reasonableness of that order. And why? See, because the DMA gives the government, the executive, both at the central and the state level, really expansive powers. If you read the DMA,
of course,
yeah, it has fairly expansive powers. But I think a lot of again, this is my personal opinion, is that the jurisprudence would probably go in the direction is that whether a step that you have taken as an executive has a reasonable nexus or some sort of a legitimate connection with the control of the epidemic. If you can establish that nexus, then you should be fine. Now, how the judiciary interprets it, that's anybody's guess. Because
but even if the judiciary upholds it, for that matter, the practical difficulty of implementing that order remains, right?
Yeah, but Ramanuj, the problem is, let's say we go by the scenario that the judiciary says it's valid and legitimate. Do I think that across the country there'll be criminal prosecution? I don't think so. All right. But will there be some criminal prosecutions? I think there will be. because we are getting feelers from a number of certain regulators in different parts of our country, where I have a feeling they will go ahead.
Right. At least to make an example or to create some.
Yes, yes. It may not be the norm, but some of them will be there.
Okay. Okay. Understood.
And,
Very
and,
interesting.
and in that context, again, this is my personal opinion, and in that context, I feel the bigger organizations, the one with bigger brand names, I think they are probably will be more in the spotlight than the medium and small enterprises. But
Correct.
that's my
It makes,
personal opinion.
right. From a political and governance point of view, that probably makes more sense to go after the bigger ones. So I'll take a few questions. One very relevant question was from Prerna Saraf, I think, was on what about the liability of employer if while performing an essential service and any employee contracts coronavirus?
Contracts coronavirus.
Yes, yes.
So while the employee is in his or her official duty responsibility,
Yes,
that's
yes,
the
yes.
time. Okay.
Yeah.
So during the discharge of the duties.
Right, right.
Okay. So again, depends on the level of employee. One is, of course, the ESI will be the ESI will bear the cost, but then that's only a certain part of the workforce. But otherwise, I think most large organizations will have their insurance policies kicking in terms of at least bearing the cost of, because it has been if you can demonstrate that it has they've contracted it during the course of the employment, I don't think there should be much of a problem in terms of at least the cost perspective. I think where the interesting thing is, and this is something that I have been asked formally also, what happens to the disclosure of information to the other employees? I think that's an interesting perspective, because the employer is caught, right? Because you have your overall ethical and legal obligation to ensure that the health hazard is contained, but you also cannot disclose that who exactly has that disease, because that actually is personal and sensitive information. So that's actually an interesting question. And I think most employers like to play it safe. They don't want to disclose who the employee is, but they ensure that the others are tested and quarantined at their own cost, at the employer's own cost.
Right. And okay, and then there's a whole question about lack of PPE, like personal protection, gears, and also other things not being provided by employer, and then somebody contracts. So could there be negligence cases, and what happens in those circumstances, especially given that a lot of doctors have been exposed to coronavirus because they haven't been given sufficient protection?
Again, depends on the sector, but the standard operating procedure basically makes it very clear that if you want to follow the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare guidelines, if you want to follow the Ministry of Health Affairs guidelines, you have to provide certain basic things. And the SOP under the MHA orders are fairly clear. Like if you're in a hospital, if you don't provide PPE, that's actually criminal. You have criminal liability.
Right.
But then,
in most of the cases in hospitals, they are providing PPE in the corona wards and not providing in the other wards, for example, right? Now, in other wards also, there's a high chance of contracting coronavirus. Naturally, it is understood. It has happened in many cases that, it has spread into the other wards, and then obviously there might be some. And from that way, but you haven't provided PPE there to the doctors or the nurses or healthcare workers. So those cases might go to the court in the future. I mean, what do you think? Government definitely being sued, highly likely, and also other private players.
Now, I haven't evaluated this specific circumstance in detail because we haven't come across this. But if I have to hazard a guess today, I think there will be huge legal exposure.
Right. And also the interesting thing is that, today, even if somebody is, let's say providing internet services, which is an essential service, and they are working around the neighborhood, fixing the internet connections or putting up connections or making sure equipment work, they are not really being provided hazmat suits, right? So they are also in a way exposed to some risk. So do you think they could come back later and say you should have provided us more protection than what you provide? Only a mask should not have been given to us, but much more.
See, that way our laws have not got into
So there's no
hazmat,
clear legal issues around this. Like so far, no clarity in the legal system.
because none of our SOP regulations in any state, if I'm not mistaken, talk about hazmat suits. So maybe there may not be much of a legal angle to it. But if you don't provide some other basic things like, your specific masks and gloves and sanitizers, that's a big problem. Like, for instance, without taking names, let's say if you have an e-commerce company delivering food to you, if that specific delivery boy or girl does not have those basic things in place given by the company, there's a big legal exposure there.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think government is going to do to stimulate employment going forward? Can we expect any changes in the laws to increase the number of this thing? I have another important question that another guest has asked. A very important question. So one thing is that we might see less sexual harassment in the workplace, which is basically because everything is under the camera right now. So you are interacting from home with people, so there may be less allegations of sexual harassment at workplace. At the same time, there has been an increasing allegations of sexual harassment on social media, and then people approaching employers saying that your employee has done sexual harassment of people outside the organization, you should take action, right? So, okay, so two questions, one after the other.
That's a fascinating question, the sexual harassment angle.
Okay, you can take that first, sure.
Yeah. Look, common sense would dictate that you will have probably lesser instances of sexual harassment investigations. I mean, of examples or incidents. But common sense has never had much role to play with anything to do with sexual harassment, right?
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of cases that we come across, forget common sense, there's no sense. Really. So I think that's probably being optimistic. I hope that person is right. But I don't, if I have to take a cynical point of view, sexual harassment can be done even without the physical proximity.
Can be done, but the level of accountability is much higher right now when you are under so much surveillance. You are interacting only through Zoom or only through your phone. You're creating evidence at every step necessarily, right? Because you don't have unsupervised time, so to speak.
Exactly. So basically, if it actually happens, you will have far greater chances of establishing it, because there will be some amount of electronic trail. I'm also hazarding a guess here. There will be some amount of electronic trail. And if somebody has that kind of inclination or bent of mind, I hardly feel a lack of physical proximity will stop a person from doing nonsense like this.
Right. So you believe that sexual harassment cases might not see any. Okay, makes sense. What you're saying makes a lot of sense. What about the other part of the question about the social media harassment of outsiders, right? So even recently there was a very highly publicized case where a journalist was, very filthy things were told to her by another person, and then he was there was a police case against him. He was arrested, and his employee, he was a partner in a company, and they took action against him. So it's basically there's a huge pressure on an organization that you must take action against somebody who's creating nuisance online, harassing women online. So what happens in those things?
So look, while these are really, there are quite a few examples of these nowadays. These are really unfortunate examples, and some of them are quite despicable. The problem, it's not a problem, but the law is actually intended for certain other circumstances. So let's say if there is a CXO of specific organization who's generally been harassing somebody else on social media. Now, the first thing is the alleged victim, is she connected to the workplace in any manner? The
It is
answer,
not.
yeah, the answer is no. Is she connected in any professional capacity with the company? The answer is also most likely no. See, there the law's hands are tied there. The way at least the law is structured and drafted today, the law's hands are the statute's hands are tied there. Where typically the company usually, and that's where internal policies come into place. You most responsible organizations basically have this specific clause in the employment contract and the employee handbooks and policies which says you cannot do anything even outside your role or even outside your professional of official time. You cannot do anything that may cause disrepute or harm or reputational damage, so on and so forth, to the company. Most organizations actually go on the basis of those provisions to get rid of employees like this. It's not usually the sexual harassment law.
Right. But it is not under sexual harassment law, and still the employer is pressurized to take action. So where does it leave them legally?
Where does he leave the?
Where does it leave the employer in a legal position? Because it's a difficult position, right? Because they can't initiate a sexual harassment this thing, but
No.
people expect that they would fire this person at the same time.
More often than not, that person gets fired if there is evidence, and the employer also has a right to dismiss the employee because of the provisions that I referred to.
Right.
But it's not against a sexual. It's not on the basis of a sexual harassment investigation, because the employer honestly does not have a right to initiate an investigation at that point.
Okay. So there is there's a lot of questions in the chat about retainership issue of lawyers and how lawyers are being terribly exploited because of retainership. I just want to tell you two things. All of those who are super concerned and you think, oh, we are not getting PF because we are lawyers. Please note that most lawyers who aren't enough, they do not want to be employees. They want to be retainers so that they pay less taxes. Okay. And you don't, if you, by the way, if you get PF, it will be essentially deducted from your salary and deposited in the PF account. It's like the employer has a total package, and the PA, PSI, whatever you want, all those benefits are taken out of the package. So your overall salary that you get in hand comes down. Okay, so this is how it acts, works in reality. And lawyers do not want to be employed in most cases. If you want, there are some law firms which employ you as an employee, and many times lawyers don't want to join those law firms. Many times because they save so much tax when they are professionals, retainers, right? So your overall take home significantly increases when you do not have those things. That's one thing. The other thing is that it would be seriously a problem if you are an employee, then you have to give up your right to appear in the court. So the day you become an employee,
Exactly.
forget your right to appear in the court. That is why most lawyers prefer to be retainers, right? So these are the two things, but sure,
I mean,
please.
that's an unfortunate law, but it's still there.
So you want to, if you want to rebel, then you must rebel against the Bar Council of India to remove that rule. But then there's a possibility that people who are working in in-house councils, they will not hire employers. So there's a lot of problems. Like they may not hire lawyers in the courts. In some cases, they'll start appearing themselves. So there are many people with many different interests here. It's not as simple as to blame that why do law firms hire people or retainership, because that is the stalemate that has been arrived at after many years of confusion. Okay, so how do you think when law firms, maybe you're seeing pay cuts and layoffs in law firms also. Of course, everybody calls it voluntary, but it is a little hard to digest that everybody is voluntarily accepting pay cuts. So what's happening in law firms, and how does this given that people are retainers mostly and not employees, how does this work out?
Ramraj, I can only speak about my own firm. I don't know what's happening in other firms.
No, from a legal perspective, like, okay, do talk about your own firm, but do talk about others as well. As from a legal perspective, how does it work? Because we are retainers, let's say we're working in a law firm as a retainer, and of course they ask us, please give us your consent, and you have to give the consent because you can't get another job right away. So how does this work?
Well, normal, yeah, you're on a retainer contract, right? So your normal rules of contract would apply. I mean, there has to be consent.
Right. So it's
And,
just consent.
and also, I mean, look, it depends on the composition structuring of certain law firms. Some of them have that flexibility to while your total, if your total package is 100 rupees, some of them have the flexibility even in the contracts to actually tinker around what is the fix and what is the variable and to alter the conditions. And these were always there. This is not something that they are inventing right now.
Yeah, but right now they need to do much more. Like in some cases, some big companies have told their senior employees to take a 80% pay cut, and they had to accept it because what else? Otherwise you leave and find another job is the situation, right? So if you
Absolutely.
refuse, so what happens if you refuse? There's a request and you refuse that. No, I'm not going to take this voluntary pay cut. I'm not taking. Okay, I won't accept it. So what happens then? Essentially, you might get fired for some other reason, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, in the sense, there may be some employers who may try to push you, but I think most employers, okay, also having said that, like, I think most senior employees also understand today the exact extent of the financial damage that has happened.
Yes. And people are glad to have a job rather than having a full pay. That is understandable.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We have seen many scenarios where the employer has no justification, like universities which have received their fees in full, right? Law colleges for that matter are demanding that their employees take a 70%, 80% pay cut. I'm baffled by this. And this is happening. I mean, okay, see, law is not only for the people who are playing by the rules or playing fair, but there are these scenarios. So what do people do in that circumstance? So we understand fully that, if like Piyush is asking right now, that what happens, how can I reduce, what can I do? Of course, you have to reach a mutual agreement with your employees that let us reduce it. Do you want the company to be standing when this is over or not, right? And many times they will come on board with you and agree that yes, we would rather that the company survive. It's not like you can leave this job and go find another in the same sector, at least in most cases. If you can, then you should do it. But otherwise, rather than taking the company down, many workers would prefer that we retain the job and get a smaller salary, right? Now that may be a subject to negotiation. Now that's one thing. The other thing is that the employees know that really the cash flow hasn't been affected of a certain business or a certain organization. It may not be even a business for that matter. And still the employer is inside. I've heard it from so many people that, somebody earns only 25,000 rupees in a lawyer's chamber and is told this month will not pay you. But why? Because the work is going on and they can see the work is going on. Maybe clients are paying a little lesser, but they don't want to agree to such scenarios that, I get paid only 25,000, cut even that. So what's going to happen in these scenarios? And is there something that employees can do? What are their legal remedies? And what is the legal sanctity of these employers?
So you're saying the universities? I mean, honestly, I haven't probably paid attention to that. Universities are cutting salaries, is it?
The private universities.
Private universities.
Many people are simply taking this as an opportunity to cut costs, or maybe out of fear also, without having.
Yeah. So okay. So a lot of responsible employers, and I can tell you that I'm very fortunate to have interacted with a number of these and advised a number of these organizations. They have actually sort of, even the voluntary payment cuts and all, they've offered it commensurate to the amount that an employee earns. So somebody who's earning 25,000 or 30,000, they've probably recommended or offered.
Yeah, but these are responsible people. There are a lot of irresponsible people.
Yeah.
Let's come to
No. Fair enough. I'm saying that's the ideal course of action, of course, depending
Sure.
on the level of financial package that you are. But for I think employees in these, let's say, these education institutions who are being forced to take, I would say there are two avenues. One is, of course, it's a breach of contract because you can't compel somebody to do this. Secondly, is a pay cut today is a direct contravention of a Ministry of Home Affairs order. So you can actually file an FIR because it's criminal prosecution. So these are two things that is available. But then you'll have to demonstrate also that that person is being compelled to do this. You can't just arrive and have a claim either in court or criminal complaint. You have to demonstrate. You'll have to establish at least a bona fide manner. At least you have to show something that that he or she is being forced to do this.
Right. So we might actually see a lot of legal action, especially from lawyers going forward. Right, it is quite possible that
Probably. I mean, at least the well-known law firms, the top 30 law firms in this country, I don't think they are silly enough to force people to do these things.
No, these are lawyers' chambers.
Yeah, but there'll be exceptions, of course, and yes, you will probably see a lot of rise in claims and prosecution. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Okay, great. So actually, we are already like 23 minutes past our time. There are a lot of questions though. I would like. What do you have? A few more minutes? Should we take a few more questions? Or
yeah, let's do this till 1:30. I have something after that.
Okay. So we have just 6 minutes, guys. Anybody wants to come online and ask a question? Live, or I can read out some questions. If you want to actually, say your question personally to Avik, just raise your hand. There's this functionality to raise your hand. I can allow you in the Zoom. Of course, in YouTube, those who are watching this on YouTube, I can't do that but in Zoom, I can do that. So, questions, anybody? Okay. There's a question about the new ordinance by the UP government that suspended many of the labor laws. Can it be challenged constitutionally? Surely it will be challenged constitutionally. But what will be the outcome? You want to comment on that?
I honestly, I don't know. Of course, I know it will be challenged.
Yeah.
I know in this sense. I don't
Okay. So let's talk about something more interesting, right? So, can you say something about how is this really going to attract investors, foreign investors? Like I think that's the plan. Right? Changing these rules and relaxing labor laws would somehow make foreign investors more interested to move their factories from China to India, or people who are looking for new destinations to set up their factories would consider India. Do you think that is correct?
I think we need labor law reforms. I wouldn't say suspension is reforms. Mm-hmm. Any foreign investor, forget foreign, any investor likes stability, right? Likes consistency, likes interpretation on a line which the management or the lawyers can predict. I think those are the things that probably attract investment at the end of the day. I think we'll probably be going on that path, but just a blanket suspension, I am not sure if it will have that kind of desired effect. I may be wrong, but we need more. I think the need is reforms more than what we are having at the moment.
Right. This looks like a signal, though. Like you are signaling to the potential investor that we are so liberal for attracting investment. So let's take Shivya's question. She has a question. Yeah, Shivya, you're online. Please ask your question. Shivya? Well, there's no sound from Shivya's side. Okay, there's Galaxy J8. I'm not sure who this is, but please ask your question. Yeah. Are you there? No. No questions. Okay, Anil. Anil Aluwalia, you want to ask a question?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Yeah. One minute. I just wanted to inform or ask, wherein employees who have taken voluntary separation packages from their company, maybe about 4 5 months back, 6 months back, and because of this COVID thing, they are not finding
Getting
new
paid.
opportunities.
Acha,
So whether they can, there is any from legal point of view, or they can, go back to their companies and ask for, re-employment, or it will depend only on the company's, available opportunities.
Go ahead, Anil.
So, so, so Anil, if I understand the question accurately, you're saying that the employee has voluntarily taken a separation way before the COVID-19 situation started. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, somebody
Yeah,
took voluntary retirement before COVID, but then he was
it's
getting
called
paid over time. The payment was
yeah,
happening over time.
it's actually called voluntary, but there were maybe no roles at that time, and it's
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
called a voluntary separation package, but
You got it, Anil. Don't worry. I got the question. I'll clarify. Okay?
actually
Because
involuntary
your internet is
by the
not
company.
supporting. We can't hear you. Okay, so Avik, the question is that, and Anil, you can confirm this on the chat if you want, that basically he's saying that he got a voluntary retirement for whatever reasons, but after that there was a payment was to come over a period of time, and then COVID happened, and now he is not getting paid, right? Or there are those financial commitments where the company are not being met. So what are his options?
No,
And
you have
one
a
thing,
you have a claim. You have a
legal,
valid claim for breach of contract.
yeah. So that is
And
one.
and the other thing is that if your VRS was structured in a way that you would get monthly payment, and if that has actually spilled over into the COVID-19 months, there also basically nobody can cut your salary. So there also you have another claim, because for the purpose of financial accounting, you will still be on the payrolls when they are paying you on a monthly basis.
Okay. There's a question on can there be a suspend, and also I think Anil also wanted to know if he can go back and join the same employer. Yes, it is up to your negotiation. Everything is not written in the law. You can go and do it if you can talk and you both of you agree. It's based on mutual consent, right?
Sorry, Raman, I didn't get the question.
Okay, he was also asking, can I go back to my employer and ask to be reinstated or check if there's any employment that I can do now, since he's not giving me VRS or not be able to pay for the VRS.
I think that will be difficult to ask for reinstatement. You can claim for.
It's not a legal right, but if he agrees, you can get it, right? So
Of course,
that's
of course, of course.
It's not a legal right as such. Okay, so there is a question on can all the weekends be suspended after lockdown is lifted? And this is a question that has come many times. So I don't know what is this we are talking about. Like we have one doomsday, and some of us work on the weekends a lot, but that doesn't mean that weekends should be suspended. I mean, I don't think there's any such thing. Is there something like this?
No, there isn't anything like this.
I have never heard of anything like this. Okay, great. So I think we have answered a lot of questions today, and we can wrap this up. It's 1:31. Thank you, Avik, for spending time with us and sharing your insights and so many very interesting questions that I'm sure at least I had on my mind for a long time. And it's great to get those clarified from an expert. Thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you, how can they reach out?
I'm on LinkedIn, plus my email address is on my firm website. It's anywhere. Just if you want to take it down, it's avik.biswas@induslaw.com. If you don't remember, just Google this, you'll get it to a firm website. So no problem.
Great. So that's fantastic. And if you have any further questions, do leave them under the chat on YouTube. Okay, I will share the YouTube link here also once, because I will get a week. Once if I have 4-5 questions, I'll request a week to separately answer them if there are some substantial questions, of course. Okay. Okay.
Sure.
So that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day. I'm going to share the link quickly. Here you go. Oops.
Hey, thanks, Ramo. This was great. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.